Hello, baseball fans. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Welcome into On Deck. I'm Tyler Redmond. As always, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I really do appreciate it. Been wanting to get here to talk to you for obvious reasons, because officially the Braves season is over after losing to the Philadelphia Phillies, who will move on, and we know now they will be facing the San Diego Padres in the National League Championship Series. And I think it's clear that very few people saw this one coming. I especially did not. I told you a few weeks ago that I didn't think that there was one team that would, come from the wild card series that really had a shot to take down either the Braves, the Dodgers, the Astros, or the Yankees. I just didn't think it was the case. I didn't think any of those teams had it in them, and boy, was I wrong. I missed the ship on that one. The Phillies are playing the best baseball that they have played all year. The Padres, the same. The Guardians are giving the Yankees all they can handle. Of course, that final Game 5 will be tonight. It is delayed currently due to inclement weather, but it will take place tonight at some point, the Yankees and the Guardians. And you know what? I know that the Mariners lost and the Astros were pretty dominant, but if we're honest for a second, even that series was, could have easily gone 4 games. Mariners had it locked down for Game 1, and Yordan Alvarez hits a walk-off 3-run homer that you could argue, shoulda, coulda, woulda never happened if the Mariners had been able to lock it down in the pen rather than bring out Robbie Ray. That being said, the wildcard teams have been much more competitive than I originally thought they were. And before we talk about the Braves season as a whole, before we get into that, I really want to focus on this Major League Baseball postseason format that has been newly introduced this year. And I'm not calling anybody out. I don't think anybody has made a huge mistake or anything. But I do want to talk about this postseason format, because I remember a few years ago when this was first being introduced to the public, there was a lot of conflicting opinions from players, from fans, from all kinds of voices about one particular thing in this new format, and that was the layoff, the long layoff. You're talking about a layoff that's as long as, maybe even longer than the All-Star break in the middle of the postseason. So it is a bit of a factor to consider, especially when you consider that the Dodgers, 111 wins, the Braves, 101 wins, and of course the Mets also, 101 wins, none of them are in the championship series. Instead, you have an 89-win team and you have an 87-win team taking place in the National League Championship Series. That's really what we're going to focus on tonight, is the National League. But in general, I remember a couple years ago, it really came down to two sides. It came down to, number one, the postseason should not be expanded and should reward the teams that were successful across that 162-game season. Number two, of course, the postseason should be expanded to feature more teams in prime spots in the postseason and be more conducive to the casual viewer. Now, I think most of us, the fans that are dedicated to the sport, that watch it religiously, I think most of us would say we're probably lean more towards number one here. We want the teams that were successful across the 162-game season to get all the advantages, right? The wildcard teams should not have the advantage. And I really believe that Major League Baseball was trying to do that. Major League Baseball historically has wanted to reward the teams that were successful across 162, because that should mean something. The regular season should mean something. This is not March Madness. This is Major League Baseball. There is a big difference. And 162 games, of course, is a marathon. If you get to the postseason, if you get a bye, it should be a reward, not a detractor. And right now, just from what we've seen, and it's, of course, small sample size, but from what we've seen, it has been the opposite. It's been the wildcard teams who continue to play, who were able to stay in routine, that have been successful for the most part. And I know the American League is still up for grabs between the Yankees and the Guardians. Of course, that takes place tonight. I know the Astros made it through. But you could argue that this is, the opposite of what a lot of us expected. Again, this is not something that I saw coming. I doubt this is something that very many of you saw coming. And whether or not you thought the Phillies would beat the Braves, or whether or not you thought the Padres would beat the Dodgers, or whatever the case may be, I don't think any of us expected that both of them would lose. I don't think so, and not in this fashion. I think that was the biggest surprise. And with that, it's ultimately it needs to be discussed, regardless of what side of this you fall on. Major League Baseball wants to include as many teams in the postseason as possible. Think about it. More teams means more eyes on the postseason. Think about how fun Wild Card Weekend was, how exciting that was, the first of its kind. That's only because Major League Baseball expanded the teams. They added more teams that were eligible for the postseason. Last year, the Phillies would not have even qualified. So I think that needs to be looked at. And it is exciting, especially for Philadelphia fans. It is certainly exciting, and it would be exciting, even more so if they continue to expand. More on that in just a second. But I do think this is where we need to start. This is my starting point, is this right here, this argument, the expansion versus non-expansion. I wanted you to see this from Major League Baseball's point of view. Major League Baseball's point of view is a lot closer to number 2 here. It should be expanded, feature more teams, get more fan bases involved, get more eyes on the product. And look, no viewers means no commercial revenue for the playoffs. They have to be able to show that they have that viewership, and more importantly, that it is growing. The best way you can do that in the postseason is by adding teams to it. Again, the Phillies were added this year. And I look at it, Tampa, Seattle, Toronto, Philadelphia, St. Louis, San Diego, New York. They were all in the wild card rounds. This is 8 fan bases that were represented in that round. 4 of which, of course, did not make it through. But for those that did, it was obviously worth their while. And for baseball, MLB had massive improvements in their viewership for the Wild Card Series. Last year, the Wild Card Series was 1 game apiece. A winner-go-home situation, exciting television. It worked well. I always liked it. I always like the idea of a 1-game playoff. I think it is the most exciting, most outside of a Game 7 in the World Series, the most we-got-to-win-today possibility there is. But look, the 2 games last year, the American League Wild Card and the National League Wild Card, that got up to 14.36 million viewers gross. The 9 games averaged out to 25.2 million viewers in total. So the 9 games across the American League, National League. Now you might say, well, yeah, but the 2 games last year averaged more per game. That is true. But if you can add more games and add more viewers, that's what Major League Baseball wants. And the drama in this wild card series was, it was just as real as a 1-game playoff. It was just as, exciting as a 1-game playoff. It really was. I'll tell you, I sat there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and watched the entirety of Wild Card Weekend from 1 game to the next. When 1 game finished, I moved on to the next, and I didn't miss a beat. So I think it was very conducive for television as well. And that's what Major League Baseball tends to focus on. I want you to see it from their perspective because they do have to make this conducive for the casual viewer. Me and you don't care anything about that. Me and you are dedicated fans. We're going to watch no matter what. But there are those casual fans that Major League Baseball has to attract to make their product watchable. And I think that, again, this was a success for baseball. The Wild Card Series itself was a success for baseball. Credit to Rob Manfred on that. But it leads to another problem, one that I already sort of mentioned. And if you've been following with postseason, of course, you know where I'm going with this. We've had the expansion versus non-expansion conversation. But what about the rest versus rust conversation? If this is your first time watching this channel, I cover the Atlanta Braves regularly throughout the regular season. That is the team we primarily focus on. And I will tell you that what I'm about to say is not any favoritism towards Atlanta. Rather, it is more so it was a wake-up call for me. And I think it was a wake-up call for a lot of people because I did not give the Phillies enough credit. I did not think that they would win this series. I thought, of course, they had their chance. They had a fighter's chance, much like I thought every other wild card team had a fighter's chance. But I thought the Braves were far better going in. Of course, there was questions around the pitching, but I really thought that the Phillies wouldn't be able to stand against the Braves. I didn't think the Padres would beat the Dodgers. To tell you the truth, I also didn't think the Mariners would beat the Astros. And as of right now, the games between the Yankees and the Guardians, it could go either way tonight. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think, for sure the Phillies outplayed them. The Padres outplayed the Dodgers. But again, the NLDS between the Braves and the Phillies was a huge wake-up call for me. I did not think there would be one single team in the wild card round that made it beyond it, and they did. And so credit to them. That's what I thought, and boy, was I wrong. But think about it. How can a team who had to pitch their horses and in theory should be tired and worn down from the wild card series beat the team who was better than them by far in the regular season? We're talking about an 87-win team and a 101-win team. They were by far better, the Atlanta Braves were, and they were waiting and resting before the matchup. How can that happen? Not to mention, the wildcard winner only gets to pitch their aces once, unless it's on very short rest in the division series. Of course, for the Braves' perspective, they only had to see Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola once in a 5-game series. So, I'll tell you, and this is obvious, from the Atlanta perspective, this was very unexpected. And if we're honest, the postseason format was far from the only factor working against the Braves. These are not excuses, make no mistake, but these are factors. Number one, Max Fried was not right. Whether he was still sick or not, he did not pitch well. Number two, Spencer Strider was coming off of the oblique injury. He was only going to pitch 3 innings anyway, didn't pitch particularly well. And of course, number three, the offense was dead. The offense did not look like themselves. And that's really what I want to focus on. The Braves had legitimate reasons for not winning this series. No argument there. But then I focus on number three. I look at this offense that we saw in the NLDS against the Phillies, and I look at the offense I saw 2 weeks ago against the New York Mets, and they're radically different. This is one of the best offenses in baseball, one of the best home run hitting teams in baseball, and no, that's not always successful, but in this situation, I just look at it and I say, how could this team, how could this offense fall off that quickly? And of course they did. And it's certainly far from impossible that a team and an offense can fall apart come postseason. Like it is certainly not just, it's far from impossible that could happen. And if it was an isolated incident, I may have looked past it. If the Braves have just not hit very well. I mean, of course, we know Riley was 1 for 12 in the series. Matt Olson didn't hit well. Dansby Swanson didn't hit well. A lot of their star players did not hit well. Nobody hit particularly well. And, of course, they had fielding miscues, and they had other issues as well, and pitching wasn't exactly on par. If it was just that, I could look past it. But similar to the 101-win Braves losing to the 87-win Phillies, the 111-win Dodgers fell to the 89-win Padres. So you're not only seeing better teams lose in the postseason, but teams in the same division who are better than the other are losing to the team that did not do as well in the regular season. That is what really caught my eye, because you look at the National League East. The Phillies were in third behind the Mets and the Braves, who both had 101 wins. You look at the National League West, the Padres were in second place, but it was a very distant second place. You're talking 22 games back behind the Dodgers, who were first place in the National League West. I want to be careful here because, again, I'm not knocking the Phillies and the Padres. They showed up. They won what they needed to win. But these two teams figured it out and were good enough to beat the Braves, Dodgers, and Mets, respectively. But when there are 100-plus win teams losing to 89, 87-win teams, I really, especially again in a 5-game series, I'll exclude the Mets series because that was a little bit more straight up. But when you see that and you see, that kind of thing where there's smoke, sometimes there's fire. And you may be thinking, well, what about the American League, right? Okay, the 99-win Yankees are in a competitive matchup against the 92-win Guardians. That's a little bit more acceptable to me. I expected that series to go at least 4 games, maybe 5. I didn't think either one would be swept. But then again, I look at that Astros-Mariners. I look at Game 1. That could have easily put the Mariners in a Game 4 situation. I think there was ways for the Mariners to, of course, win, and you're going to find that in every series, ways that, the game could have been won, right? But, I think that the Astros were really on the back of Yordan Alvarez, who hit a walk-off 3-run homer, who basically stole the game for the Mariners in Game 1, hit a 2-run go-ahead homer in Game 2, and credit to Yordan, he's a great hitter, and credit to the Astros, they won that series. But I think that ultimately it's really on the National League side here. There's a bit of parity going on in the National League. It shouldn't be. In a game that prides itself on regular season accomplishments being, rewarded come postseason, the advantage. Of course, they look at this bye as an advantage, and that's the real question. This is the rest versus rust conversation that I want to have. Is the bye, the long layoff, truly an advantage? So far, it hasn't been. I went and got some manager comments on this exact topic. Dusty Baker, who won the series, he said, "I think it's affected everybody. The whole thing was an experiment. Nobody really knew. But from my experience with the Dodgers, it only takes a couple of days to start declining in your timing." He's talking 2 to 3 days. The layoff was 5. Brian Snicker, this is after the game the other day. "I worried about that going in. I think I said earlier 3 days is plenty. 5 days, 6 days is probably too much. It's the way the system is. And we were pretty tired. We let that thing eat the last week of the season trying to chase the division, and we did. We won the division. That's what we wanted to do. But yeah, I thought we were as good as we could under the circumstances of keeping guys sharp as we can. But it is tough when you're on go for 3 games against the Mets and then 2 games in Miami, and then all of a sudden you shut down for a week. There is something to that." Dave Roberts, the Dodgers. I think it's something that we can probably debate, but leading up to it, even right now, it's not something that we want to look at as an excuse. That's the format, the way it is. You do the best you can in the regular season to put yourself in the best position to get home field advantage, to get the bye in the wild card round, and it's on us to prepare ourselves the best we can to get through a division series, and we didn't. Everybody is saying the right things here. No excuses. No one is taking anything away from the Phillies or the Padres. They shouldn't be. Those teams came in and won. But I really want to look at this objectively. With anything new, there's always going to need adjustments, right? In anything like this, it's going to need adjustments. And I really do credit Rob Manfred. I have full faith that Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball, we're trying to do the right thing here. It's nobody's fault, but there is ways that I think this can be made better, that this layoff can be shortened, that things can change for the better and really give those teams an advantage, because I don't think it is one at this point. Every one of these managers at least point to this as something that should be discussed. Dave Roberts didn't point any fingers, but he said, I think that's something we can probably debate. That's something I think we need to do. I think we need to debate this. I think this is something that warrants conversation. And I have, let's have a conversation about it, shall we? How can Major League Baseball improve its current format? Again, this format is not exactly bad. It's just, I think there are things that can be slightly better starting it. So starting with option number 1, this is by far the most simple. I think the first game of a wild card series should be a doubleheader. I think instead of having the wild card series on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you could have it on a weekend. Have Saturday for games 1 and 2, respectively. Have game 3, if needed, on Sunday. I think that would be a little bit more so where we're looking. And that's really the simplest one. Just shorten it. And it may be 4 days, but shorten it as much as possible, because every one of these managers and everyone across baseball, I think, looked at this as the layoff is too long. It's a conversation that everybody's having right now. And I think it's a legit concern. I'm in favor of a 3-game wildcard series. I like it. I think it's set up well for TV. I think it was a great weekend to watch. But I'm not in favor for that long layoff for a team that earned a bye. They earned the advantage. And when you're starting to question, is that really an advantage, then I think we have a problem. And in this case, for the National League, of course, it was the Braves and Dodgers who lost in shocking fashion to wildcard teams. This allows MLB to cut down the layoff as much as possible, this doubleheader. Just cut it down some. This is kind of the easy way out. Give it a doubleheader, and then maybe you can wrap it up sooner rather than later. It would have a slight hit to ratings, which, of course, is a deterrent for Major League Baseball. You wouldn't have quite the amount of viewership, but I think it would be a slight loss as opposed to a big one. And I think that is something that's doable. Make game 1s and 2. Make game 1 and game 2 on Saturday as a doubleheader and put game 3 on Sunday. Now, if you're not in favor of that, or if you're indifferent, or you don't really care, I have something a little bit more radical, a little bit more over the top. If we were going to expand the postseason like we did this year, of course, we added another wild card spot, and we really went all out this year on the postseason. But I think you can get a little crazier here. And you're going to look at this. We're going to focus on the National League side here for a second. I think you could add another team. I think you can put 8 teams on each side. No one has a layoff. And those brackets right there, this is how I think it would set up. You would have the Dodgers versus the Giants, the Braves versus the Brewers. That's the team you would add, is the Brewers and Giants. So you would really add 2 teams. The Cardinals would take on the Phillies, like already mentioned. The Mets and Padres would, of course, face each other in a wild card round. So the only thing that would be changing, in a sense, would be that the Dodgers would still be playing. They'd be playing the Giants. The Braves would still be playing. They'd be playing the Brewers. Now, the one thing I don't like about this is the off chance that the Brewers or the Giants somehow beat the Dodgers. That would, of course, be detrimental, but at the same time, that's on the Dodgers and the Braves. This is something that would eliminate the layoff. The only thing that I really don't like about this isn't perfect. This is just ideas that came to me in the past few days. The only thing I don't like about it is that the Giants have a losing record. And I think when you keep expanding the postseason and keep expanding, that's really what you're going to run into. You don't want to reward mediocrity necessarily, but you also don't want to put your better teams in a situation where they're not able to be ready for their series. Now, I will also say that this would add more excitement to Wild Card Weekend. It gives an additional 4 teams a fighter's chance in the postseason landscape, 2 teams on the National League, 2 teams in the American League. It avoids the layoff, again, completely, while not taking an advantage away from the team that earned said advantage. Instead of time off, it gives the higher-seeded team a lesser-scale opponent. I'm aware this is not perfect, especially considering that, again, the Giants are below a 500 team. So, in theory, you would be rewarding regular season mediocrity more so, but if the layoff is a disadvantage, then this would nullify that. It also would act as a deterrent for teams like the Giants, like the Brewers, to look at themselves halfway through the year and realize, hey, instead of trading our better talent, of course, for the Brewers, Josh Hader was traded to the Padres. That's something that's memorable. But they would look at it and say, hey, we have a real chance in the postseason, and it would act as a slight deterrent for teams to not necessarily go trading pieces away, which is something that I think does affect fans of baseball, and especially casual fans. It's hard for teams, to keep fans invested when a lot of their players move all the time. Why would I be invested in the Chicago Cubs if everybody from 2016 is gone by 2021? And I think that is something that we need to look at. And I think it is a problem where fan bases struggle to invest. So Major League Baseball, if you're listening, I think this, although not perfect, could be a template to take it a little bit further. Now, again, not perfect. I want to hear all of your ideas, comments in the comment section. I'm going to be going for about another 30 minutes, so I do want to hear all of what you guys have to say. But I think this format, although not perfect, could be slightly better. It would nullify the layoff. It would add more teams. It would kind of bring everybody together. It's a little bit of a compromise. For baseball, guess what? More eyes are on the product. You have 2 new fan bases per league, so 4 new fan bases who are invested in the postseason. Oh, by the way, on the American League side, think about this. The Yankees would have started out by playing the Orioles. Who would not have wanted to see Adley Rutschman in the postseason in this amazing rookie year that he's having? You're telling me that's not good television? I know that the expansion for playoffs is a touchy subject in many sports, but I do think that if we're going to do this, then we have to eliminate that layoff. And look, if you want to get crazy, get crazy. That's kind of the way I feel about it. We do have a super chat, and again, thank you to everybody tuning in tonight. Really do appreciate it. Of course, sad way to end for the Braves. We're going to talk about that as well, probably the first moment somebody mentions it. But we have a super chat. We're going to get her first. Skylar says, I don't want to hear about the off days. Great teams are ready for the postseason, no matter what. The hit by pitch really messed up Acuna. He should have came out. Look, we all watched the series. We all know how it went down. I think this. I think the off days do affect you. I mean, look, I read you, the manager's comments. That's legit. It gets you out of routine. Should it have affected the offense like it did? Probably not. I'll give you that. I don't think that the Braves should have been quite so lost at the plate past Game 3, and they were. And really past Game 2. I think it takes a game to get into it. And look, they won Game 2, so there's really no excuse there. I think for the Braves, it was this perfect mixture. It was the pitching. Strider came off from injury. We expected a little too much of him. Morton gets hit by the line drive, and then right after gives up a 3-run homer. There was a lot at play there, and it's not really. This isn't what I'm saying. Isn't really specific to the Braves. This is more so objectively around the league. I'm looking at it and I'm going, if I'm Major League Baseball, do I really want the Phillies and the Padres in the postseason? Is that what I want over the 111-win Dodgers and 101-win Braves? Is that really what I want? It's a story of the underdog, and you got to give it to them. But if I look at this for the future, if I look at this to make this better, which I think we can do, I really think this can be better. So I say that to say this should be looked at. When you have this much talk about it, when you have this many articles about it, and this many managers coming out and speaking on it, it is a topic of conversation. So if it's me, I think you eliminate those days off in the future. It's not going to happen next year. Let's be real. It's not going to happen next year. But I think if we have a similar situation to this next year, then I think it very well may happen. And I look at that and I say Major League Baseball, and look, Major League Baseball always wants to expand the postseason. They want it to be, as many teams as possible. And I get what you're saying. No excuses. Credit to the Braves, because there has not been one player, there has not been one coach, there has not been one manager to complain about this and make this a big deal. They've mentioned it, of course, came up in conversations about something that could improve, but they did not take anything away from the Phillies. They admitted they got beat. Dansby came out, and if you haven't seen this post-game interview, you ought to go check it out. So I think that should be mentioned. This is not an excuse, but it is a factor. I really, truly believe it is a factor. That layoff, getting out of postseason mode after being in it, the gas was taken out from under him. And I think it is a factor. I spoke with John Estrada a couple weeks ago. A lot of you guys tuned in. I appreciate that. But a lot of you guys tuned in, and he spoke about it. He said that layoff, it's not a good thing. And, of course, the day games, that's a whole nother conversation. But the layoff is a problem. And a lot of players will tell you that. That is something that will get you out of routine. We all know that baseball players, pitchers, hitters, doesn't matter. They're creatures of habit. And when you're out of the ballpark for a week, it always takes a slight, it takes a while to get back into that groove. We all know about post-All-Star break. How big of a deal that is and how long it takes for players to get back in the groove if they're not, doing what they need to be doing. And the Braves tried. They tried to simulate games, simulate live pitching, and it either didn't work or it didn't show itself to. And I think that's the real problem. And look, we saw Olsen come out and say that, he didn't do as well as he should have done. He didn't prepare as well as he should have done. Austin Riley came out and said he didn't play as well as he should. Spencer Strider, I think pitching it's a little bit different because Max Fried, whether he'll say it or not, the dude was puking in the dugout a week and a half ago. So it's hard for me to really knock him for game one. He owned up to it. He said that I didn't do my job, and I respect that. I truly do. But it's hard for me to really knock that. That's an oddity. I don't think that it's necessarily, whether he was sick or not, I'm not suggesting that he was. Again, not taking anything away from the Phillies. But it's an oddity for him to get hit like that. It's not something that happens a ton. So for him to do that, I don't think that's something that the Braves really need to worry about going forward. I don't think it was the worst game we've ever seen pitched. Of course, we've seen worse. Game 2, Kyle Wright pitched great. Game 3, Spencer Strider, just didn't have it. And it's hard to expect somebody who's not pitched in a substantial amount of time to come out after an oblique-style injury and pitch, the best game of his life. It was just terrible timing, and a lot of forces were working against the Braves. So I'm not necessarily saying that this needs to change because the Braves didn't play well. I'm saying this needs to change because the Braves didn't play well, the Dodgers didn't play well, and I look at it and I say, well, maybe there is something to this. Especially the Dodgers surprised me more than the Braves and Phillies did. And I know the Padres are hitting great right now, and that's a little different, but you're talking about a team that won 111 games, has all the postseason experience in the world, a team that really, in theory, shouldn't be beat. I look at that and I have a lot of questions. I look in the American League and I see the Mets and the Guardians, and I wonder, if the Guardians win tonight, that's 3 out of 4 of these teams. that have made it to the championship series. I just want to let that sink in. And look, I think there is something to the idea that if you keep playing and you stay in routine, you're going to have momentum. And I think there's something to it. And look, I could be wrong. I didn't think this 2 weeks ago before this series started. I didn't think that was going to happen. I didn't see one team that I was necessarily scared of making it to the championship series. I was wrong. I'll own up to that. I was completely wrong. But I think there is something to that layoff. Thank you for the super chat, Skylar. I really do appreciate it, though. Let's see. Clayton McCullers tunes in tonight. He says he already can't wait for next year. In your opinion, what deals, trades do you consider to make the team better? Number one, you got to figure out what you're doing with Dansby Swanson. That is number one. Much like Freddie Freeman was, number one last year. Of course, we all know what happened there. But you got to figure out shortstop. Is it going to be Dansby? Is it going to be Vaughn Grissom? Is it going to be another free agent? You got to figure that out. So once you figure that out, the things that I think could make this better, you could lock down a better starting pitcher. You could lock down a more veteran starting pitcher. Of course, Max Fried, Kyle Wright, top two guys for the rotation right now. Spencer Strider is solid. Number 4, Charlie Morton. I'm not mad at that. Number 5, Jake Odorizzi. I think we can look to see some improvements. I think AA would like to improve. Of course, the idea of Jacob DeGrom is out there. I think that's a bit I don't see it happening. I would be pleasantly surprised if it did. Carlos Rodon, I think, is a legit target. And, of course, there's a million different pitchers we could go off of. But I think starting pitching should be a target. Of course, bullpen is always a target. In the field, I think you're pretty much set. And other than that, I think that, bullpen, starting pitching, and figure out shortstop would be what I would say. But, we'll see. Kenley Jansen is also another free agent, a free agent that some of you guys probably want back. Other guys probably don't. But he is someone that is highly touted. With the success of Raisel Iglesias, you may see the Braves quietly just not re-sign Kenley, especially not for as much as he made this year. He led the league in saves. Anthopoulos came out and said that they would love to have Kenley back. That's the right thing to say. But that is something to discuss too. Will the Braves pay him $18 million? I doubt it. And that's mainly because of who they have across the pen, and that's Raisel Iglesias, who had a great year, has signed for multiple years, and that's more so a housekeeping thing rather than anything. I don't think it's based on Kenley's success or lack thereof success. I think it's more so just a matter of do we really need to pay this much? And AA makes all the right moves. I mean, AA has rarely made a move that I went, ooh, I don't know about that one. So I think that's what you want to look for. Of course, we're going to have all the off-season content. We're going to have all the time in the world to talk about either what the Braves did do, or what they could do, or what they should do, or what they didn't do. So we'll have all the time in the world to talk about that in the off-season. Of course, we want you to be a part of that. So if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell for notifications so that you can be up to date with everything we're doing here during the offseason. We do have plans to do stuff for the offseason, of course, covering the Atlanta Braves. We may do some postseason coverage, extended postseason coverage, even though the Braves are not participating. We very well may cover it. And I think today was a good example of kind of what I'm talking about, just conversations about Major League Baseball as a whole, because I think we need to have them. But we do continue this during the offseason. We have interviews. We have more time for interviews. Of course, the most recent interview we did was Ron Washington, so if you haven't watched that, you ought to go check it out. Very good interview from a guy that may not be with the Braves next year. I don't know if you guys saw it, but the White Sox apparently have reached out to Ron Washington. And I'll tell you this, White Sox, if you're listening, we don't want to lose Ron Washington. That being said, I think he would be a great candidate. There's a reason we don't want to lose Ron Washington here in Atlanta. Blake Newsom says if the Yankees were to lose tonight, pandemonium would break out about the new format. That's what I'm saying. If the Yankees were to lose tonight, which very well could happen, then pandemonium would break out. Major League Baseball would very well have to at least consider moving on, because look, guys, we all know Major League Baseball loves the ratings, and the Yankees, with Aaron Judge's success this year, is a part of that. The Braves are a part of that. The defending World Series champions. The Dodgers, we all know about that. So I think there's definitely something to it. And if the Yankees lose tonight, you mark my words, you're going to see a comment from someone in Major League Baseball about this format, I think. But that's going to happen first. Handyman says, yes, it's flawed. We just didn't want it that bad. We just had it last year. So I really believe it's flawed. I do. I think the layoff hurts you more than helps you. And I think that's the real thing. It's really not about the Braves. Like I know it sounds like that because of who I cover. I get all that. But this is more so about really, truly, the entirety of Major League Baseball. Because, look, if this was the Braves, if the Braves were the Phillies, which they pretty much were last year, 89-win team that won the division and moved on, they pretty much were what the Phillies are or what the Padres are. That's what the Braves were last year. But the difference was there wasn't this long layoff, and that's really the difference. The NLDS was the same, the NLCS was the same last year, the World Series was the same. If the Braves were the Phillies right now, barely snuck into the postseason and beat the Braves, I would feel like we were committing highway robbery. I think that's the way a lot of Phillies fans feel, is that they stole one, because all year long the Braves have beat the Phillies. They beat them head-to-head. They beat the Mets, of course. So I think that they feel like they have stolen one, and great on them. You know, they won at the right time. You know, we won at the right time, honestly, if we're honest about last year. But I think this format, you know, you just have to ask yourself, is that 5-game layoff really an advantage? And that's the problem, because if you earn the advantage, you should have the advantage. And I think we're kind of need to debate whether or not that's truly an advantage. Let's see. Matthew says, Tyler, did you know DeGrom grew up a Braves fan? He says he wants to play closer to his home in Florida, but we all know Rays and Marlins won't pay him. What are the chances he gets his wish to be a Brave? Look, it's certainly plausible. I think Double-A would explore it. He would have to take a massive pay cut. And I know payroll is going to increase next year. We've talked about that. And if the Braves are willing to pay him, I mean, he's the guy. He's been the guy. I think we would probably fix him a bit. You know, he's been injury prone and that kind of thing here recently. I would love it, if I'm honest with you. I would absolutely love it if DeGrom came to Atlanta. I would not rest my off-season expectations on DeGrom. I think if we got a solid starting pitcher, whether it be DeGrom, Carlos Rodon, you know, whoever, I'd have to look at who else is out there. But as long as we got a solid starting pitcher that's not named Jake Odorizzi, I would be okay. I think our rotation is set enough. If we added Jacob DeGrom and he's healthy all year long next year and he's pitching like Jacob DeGrom, we're unstoppable in the regular season. I can't speak for the postseason, but in the regular season, I think we'd be unstoppable. I definitely think, from DeGrom's point of view, watching the Braves walk into New York or play against New York, rather, in Atlanta and sweep them at the end of the year is definitely something that should be mentioned. So I think there is some truth to that. But at the same time, I look at it and I go, is that really in the Braves' best interest? Is it really where Double-A is going to say, all right, we're gonna pull out our bargaining chip, we're gonna go get Jacob DeGrom, and we're really gonna go for it? He very well may. Of course, we've seen him pay other guys, and if DeGrom is willing to take a pay cut to win, he's made his money. You know, maybe he does. He's well within his right to do so, and of course, we'll have to wait and see. Good question. Time will tell. It'd be a very exciting offseason video if Jacob DeGrom signed to Atlanta. Of course, I think that video would have good viewership. Let's see. Steve Pineda says he can't use the format as an excuse as a Dodgers fan. We've been folding in the postseason for a decade now. The Dodgers, I've seen the conversations about the Dodgers, about firing Dave Roberts and all that. I don't think that's warranted. I'm usually a very much a defender of managers. Folding in the postseason for the Dodgers, you're right, has been a bit of a trend. Of course, they lost to the Braves last year. They did win in 2020, the shortened season. Dodger fans don't look at that shortened season as a, you know, they look at it with an asterisk, as we all do. They don't look at that as a, you know, a true victory, which I do. I think that, you know, it should be mentioned that it was a shortened season, but, you know, the Dodgers played under the circumstances they played in, and frankly, they won the World Series. So, with that said, for me, I don't look at it as a how do I put this? I don't put. You guys got beat by a Padres team that's hitting on all cylinders. The Braves got beat by a Phillies team, again, who's hitting on all cylinders right now. And the Braves, it was the perfect storm. It was the perfect mix of pitching was hurt, offense was dead. It was a lot of things. For the Dodgers, you know, I wouldn't look at it as an excuse necessarily, but it is, again, a factor. It is a factor. Let's see. Richard Davis says the Phillies wanted it more than the Braves. The Braves played like the Braves of 14 straight did, like making the playoffs was good enough. See, this is where I disagree, because I don't think the Braves are walking into this series going, okay, you know, whatever happens, happens. I don't think that. I think they may speak on it publicly a little bit more toned down. They want to win. I firmly believe that. I know there's been a lot made of the Acuna play where he didn't back up Michael Harris. I know all that. What I will say is this. To suggest the idea that teams are just going out there, and there are some teams like that, but there are teams that make the postseason and, you know, they want it all. They go for it. If you make the postseason, you're going for it all. I think they might have been trying a little too hard, to tell you the truth, especially at the plate. With that said, though, maybe this was the wake-up call. You know, you're suggesting that, you know, they're just playing like, okay, 14 straight's great, you know, the division title's enough. Maybe this was the wake-up call they needed. You know, Richard, I don't know. I think that ultimately it was a lot of bad luck at a terrible time for the Braves specifically. You know, and it, as Brian Snicker so eloquently said, it sucks. You know, there's no fun way around it if you're the Atlanta Braves. And again, I've said it, credit to the Braves. They said what you said. The Phillies outright outplayed them. And, you know, there's no way around it. They did. And credit to them. But to suggest that they just didn't want it as bad, I think is a little bit over the top. Oren Griswold says, goes to show you that our style of offense that relied heavily on the home run is flawed and vulnerable to good pitching. If we do anything this offseason, we need to sign some contact, high average hitters. Oren, I get where you're going. But I also want to just propose the idea that the way we won the World Series was with the offense we have now. And that's really where the game of baseball is. So I get where you're going. Of course, I would, you know, like to add some contact hitters. That last year was Eddie Rosario in the playoffs, was the guy that was, I mean, look, he hit homers too, but he got doubles. He got on base, you know, and there was a lot of, we saw that. And, you know, I think we could add some other hitters, but where are you going to put them, right? Your infield's pretty much locked down. The only option really would be to not to sign Dansby. Your outfield's pretty much set with your exceptional left field. You know, I look at that and I say, well, you know, I don't think so. I think the Braves offense is the Braves offense. I think that's their identity. It's not exactly what a lot of fans like. You know, it's not the old school style of baseball. But I would argue, again, that the Braves won it all last year on home run offense, on power offense. So it's really just how your team is set. You know, the Yankees is a very power heavy offense. They're, you know, in Game 5 tonight against a team who is not. You know, it's all about your style. And is it vulnerable to good pitching? Maybe. But I would also, to that point, I would say, look at the Mets series. We faced 3 really good pitchers and took them down, you know, one by one. DeGrom, Scherzer, and then Bassett. So I look at that and I say, yeah, you know, there may be some truth to the Braves offense being vulnerable to good pitching. Maybe offense is vulnerable to good pitching in general. I really think the offense did pretty okay, you know, for the most part. They put up runs. Matt Olson, of course, had a good series. But I think, you know, let me look at these final scores. Look, every game, the Braves pretty much put up runs. In Game 1, they were on their way back. You know, the Phillies bullpen was being the Phillies bullpen for at least one of the games. So I look at it and I say, yeah, I get your point. I get it. But look, in Game 1, they lost 7-6. 6 runs should win you a ball game. That one's on pitching. Game 2, they win 3-0. So they put up 3 runs there. That was good enough to win a ball game. Game 3, they lose 9-1. Now, who's really at fault there? Is it the offense or is it the side that gave up 9 runs? I think that one's on pitching as well. In Game 4, they gave up 8 runs. I mean, you can say it's the offense, but I get your point. But when you have a game that's completely out of hand before you even get to the third or fourth inning, it's on pitching. And, you can argue that it is what it is. I really think it was the perfect storm. I don't think this is on the offense. The offense was able to put up runs. How much is small ball really going to help you if you're down by 9? So I get your point, but I also think that, it's their identity. They won the division with the offense they have. They just didn't perform exceptionally well in the postseason. Ultimately, I think the Braves gave you a good year of high-class baseball. That was fun to watch. I think they did well. And look, it stinks the way it ended, but to completely look over the success of this team, I think is a bit too far. And I don't think it's necessarily the offense's fault. I look at those final scores, and again, 9-1, 8-3, 7-6. Again, 6 runs should win you a ball game. The Braves were able to do that. They couldn't take game 1. That one's on pitching. Max Fried said it himself. It's on pitching. So I think that there's some truth to what you're saying, but I also think that I just don't think it's completely foolproof. Corey Carter says the difference in this year's team was no Freddie, no Matzik, no Will Smith, no Luke Jackson, no Jock, and that is too much of the fabric of what made the team special last year. There's some truth to that. The Jock Peterson, era was great. Of course, I think he brought everything together last year. But these two teams were so different. They were so different. And look, guys, it's so hard to repeat. There has not been a team repeat in the National League since 1975 and 1976, which was the Big Red Machine. So it's very hard to repeat. You're always going to lose at some point. Does it stink the way it happened? Yes. Would it have stunk just as bad if we had lost to the Dodgers? Also yes. Or the Padres? Also yes. So I think we always look at it and say, yeah, well, last year we won the World Series and this team was never going to be that. This team had every chance in the world to win the World Series. It was just as good as last year, if not better. And I say that, and I also want to add, a lot of the old-timers you hear always say that 96 Braves were better than 95. Guess which team won? 95. The key, and Alex Anthopoulos said this, it's one of my favorite quotes by him. He said that the key for the success of a team is to be in the playoffs year after year after year. The Braves have been in the playoffs for 5 straight years. They've had a chance to do something in the playoffs for 5 straight years. It has led to 1 World Series, 5 straight division titles, obviously, and appearances in playoff games year after year after year after year after year. As long as you have a chance, you can do it. Look at the Phillies. They had a chance. They took it and ran with it. Look at the Padres. They had a chance, took it and ran with it. So to say that, this team just didn't have it because they lost all these players, I think it's unfortunate. You got to remember what all this team did. And it's in times like these that I think we kind of fall apart as fans, because you're talking about a team that brought up rookies like Michael Harris and Spencer Strider, who contributed so much to this team. You got Ronald Acuna back, and I know there's been a lot of criticism on Ronald Acuna lately, but he's, again, dealing with whatever ACL injury is still lingering. This team did a lot, and it had a lot of success. And to come out and say that, well, the fabric of the team was gone, Freddie was gone, I think this team found a new fabric. I think this team found a new life, especially come the end of the year where they faced the Mets. And look, that's kind of my point. I think the life was drained out of them with this layoff. And look, the team that we saw this week wasn't the team we saw 2 weeks ago. It just wasn't. And they know it. We know it. And hopefully that doesn't happen again. But that's part of the postseason. That's part of it. It's all about who shows up when. The Dodgers are battling the same thing, guys. And what really changed about their team? Nothing. Other than they added a former MVP in Freddie Freeman. Nothing changed about their team. They got better, as did the Braves. Sometimes things just don't fall your way. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Guys, remember to do me a favor. If you like the content, I would really appreciate you liking the video. It really does help the channel grow, and it really does help me grow as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for your constant support. Remember, Super Chats do get priority, so if you have something specific you want to talk about, make sure to put it in. Make sure to put in a Super Chat. We'll, of course, put you first. Let's see. JL says 5 days off is too much, maybe 3 or 4 max. Corey Carter says Olsen raked and Dansby and Austin were cold, and that's baseball for you. Exactly. You're talking about 2 of the biggest contributors of the year in Riley and Dansby. Of course, Riley had a slow, was kind of slow towards the end of the year, but Dansby, without a doubt, was one of our hottest hitters, and he didn't perform, But that's the thing, guys. Offense is not something that you can count on. And I remember talking to Wash, and one of his quotes, if you watch the interview, you'll see this. One of his quotes was, you can't always count on offense. You're going to slump in offense. But you can never slump in two things, pitching and defense. Defense is aside right now. Pitching is something you can't slump in. And the Braves hit their slump at the worst time possible. It just is what it is. That's what happened. Let's see. Blake says, it was definitely fun, especially with the Braves out of it. The weekend was relaxing to see the rest of it play out. Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was at a wedding. A lot of you guys probably watched the last video I did. I had a good distraction. I put my phone down, flipped it over, and focused on my friends getting married. So I'm glad that was there, because if I was here, I would have been going crazy. I got to kind of put it away. But, look, there's always next year. And that's the fun part about this Braves team, because we've said it time and time again. This Braves team is set to last. And that is something that we can't really, we're already talking about next year, and that's really the fun part, because look at this, and this is kind of an old graphic, but it still sort of rings true. A lot of these guys are coming back, and we're not even looking at, the Michael Harris's and Spencer Striders. That's not even on here. This is from earlier this year. We thought this was good, and now it's even longer. You have Riley. You have so much more. And look, I think that it's easy for us to lose that perspective. And look, if you haven't watched, Alex Anthopoulos and Brian Snicker react to the loss after they could really kind of put it together and talk about it, you're missing out. You really ought to go check out the Anthopoulos interview, because I thought it was great. And he feels probably very similar to how I feel, how you feel, how we all feel. It sucks. There's no way around it. It absolutely sucks if you're the Atlanta Braves in this situation. However, there's a lot to look forward to. Let's see. Pumpkin Town Primitive says, I miss the old format where the East and West Division only, and the playoffs, the World Series, simple, and it leaves the best at the top. Yeah, I agree. I hate to divert the topic for a second, but the college football has this argument every year. We should expand. We should expand. We should expand. I have a good buddy who I've talked about before. He's tuned in before. Josh Pate. He's the one of the top college football podcasters out there. Good buddy of mine, mentor of mine. He always talked about the college football playoff and how it should never expand, because if you're not rewarding excellence, what are you doing? I am more towards that, but I'm a legit baseball fan. I'm not the casual viewer that baseball is trying to appeal to, and that's really what you got to factor in, is what is Major League Baseball's best interest? Not what is the fans' best interest. I hate to break it to you. What is Major League Baseball's best interest? They want eyes on the product. Because, look, you're going to watch anyway. I'm going to watch anyway. It's all about who can we get else attracted. Richard Davis says, get off the rust stuff. The Braves wanted to win the division so they could get rest. You can't have it both ways. Agreed. I just think the format in general should change. Let's see. Matthew says, Tyler, do you remember when the Rockies dominated last season and in the playoffs, but then got swept in the World Series by the Red Sox after taking the week off? Or late season, I'm sorry. I read last season. Do you remember when they dominated late season and in the playoffs, but then got swept in the World Series by the Red Sox after taking a week off? Baseball isn't football. Rest equals rust. Momentum matters. That's my point. Is it really an advantage if the other team can go get momentum, stay in a routine? And a lot of people won't understand that. A lot of people won't quite pick up on that, and that's okay. Look, if you don't, if you don't get it, then that is what it is. But it's true. Momentum is a factor. You talk to any baseball player, you talk to any former baseball player, they all say it. Momentum matters. Momentum carries, and it does matter. The Phillies drove a lot of momentum after taking the Cardinals down. I didn't think they'd beat the Cardinals, and they proved me wrong, and I think they proved a lot of people wrong in that situation alone, not to mention the Braves. We'll see. Matthew also says, baseball is a game of rhythm and consistency. Bye weeks hurt baseball teams and always have. Once guys like Swanson and Riley get too much time off, they lose their rhythm. They are used to playing every day. Precisely my point. Thank you guys again for tuning in. We're not going to be on here much longer. If you got something specific, please make sure to of course, super chat, and we will, get as many in of those as we can. But I'm going to have to wrap it short tonight, guys. I do apologize. Chris Kaysen asked a good question. I'm just sort of seeing it. Any idea on the left field position? Rosario, Grossman, Ozuna, 3 guys. Maybe would be nice to have 2 guys there, with 1 being the main starter. Rosario signed through the end of next year. Obviously, Ozuna is signed for a while. Grossman, I'm not sure what his contract details are. Let's just assume they're all coming back. I think Rosario could potentially have a much better year next year now that his sight is better, and hopefully he can play a better 162. So that is an option. Grossman was a nice surprise at the deadline, but I think that is something that we could attack at the trade deadline. I don't have anything in particular that I would say, but it is something that I think we could tackle. Vaughn Grissom is another idea that's currently internal. Nothing in the minors that I'm looking at really indicates anybody that's like, yeah, we're going to go use him. That could change. But that's kind of where I'm at. I think that could be attacked in free agency. But I also think that you have 4 fairly decent options out of that as well. But those guys could also be relegated to the bench if you were to go get a legit starter. Guys, remember, we're going to wrap it up very soon. I'm going to answer a couple more random questions, and I'm going to probably get out of here. So remember, just make sure to, like the video, of course, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. Really do appreciate you tuning in tonight. Whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, it's okay. I appreciate you tuning in and talking baseball with me no matter what. James Saunders, this is probably the last one. Oh, sorry, you're not even asking me a question. Let's see. Bill Gates, Braves lost because Fried and Strider crapped the bed. I have no better way to put that. Pitching matters most in the playoffs, and the Braves pitching did not give the bats a chance. Exactly. And that's why I'm not, here to change the, I'm not here to change the identity of the team. The team is what it is, especially offensively. But it can always be better. It's gotten better from last year, I fundamentally believe. They won more games than they did last year, and I think they played much more competitive baseball within the division than they did last year as well. So that being said, guys, I really do appreciate you tuning in. That's where we're going to wrap it up. So again, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so that you're up to date with everything we're doing during the off season. Not going to be as consistent during the off season, not quite as much to talk about, but we do drop videos and occasionally talk baseball. And of course, we do occasionally also go live. So make sure you're a part of it by, again, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting the bell for notifications, and of course, you can follow me on social media. Those right there are the tags. If you want a closer, just eye on the channel, that is a good place to do it. And of course, we'll continue to talk about the Atlanta Braves and of course Major League Baseball as a whole. With that being said, guys, one last time, thank you so much. Of course, the 2022 season is over for the Atlanta Braves. It stunk the way it ended, but it's over. And of course, I want to thank you because it's very rare that I have days like this, so I'm going to take advantage of it while I got it. It's very rare that I have comments after the Braves lose that were as friendly as the ones I got the other day. Really quickly, Nick Mandelberg, thank you for your comment. William Baker, thank you for your comment. And everybody else that took the time to thank me for my coverage, I really do appreciate it. Thank you for watching. This is something I'm going to do no matter if you're watching or not, but thank you for watching. It really does make it worth doing, and I really do appreciate every comment I got the other day. It really does make a difference, and thank you to all of you guys tuning in tonight. You guys are great. You guys have been great all year long. We have seen so much growth on this channel you don't even know. So thank you for that. And of course, thank you for your continued support. Can't wait for 2023. Of course, we have a long road to get there. We have off season. We have contracts to talk about. We have deals to talk about, trades to talk about, spring training to talk about, and then of course, opening day 2023. And I can't wait. But this channel does not pause. This channel does not go away. We want you to be a part of it. So make sure to subscribe. That is where we're going to end tonight. Again, thank you for this awesome season, and I will, of course, be here through the off season as well. So thank you for that, and we'll see you next time right here at On Deck.